We also know too, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder or depression, that your hippocampus shrinks, right? It dies and shrinks. And you can sometimes get it to grow back. Your hippocampus shrinks and your amygdala grows. And the amygdala increases emotional sensitivity. And the hippocampus inhibits emotional sensitivity. And so if you've been badly defeated, the hippocampus shrinks and the amygdala grows. Now, if you recover, the hippocampus will regrow. And antidepressants actually seem to help that. But the damn amygdala never shrinks again. And so, well, so that's another lesson from the lobster. It's quite a terrifying one. But it's one, like, it's so interesting that you can relate to that, right? It's like, I get what that poor crustacean's going through, you know. So, okay, here's the rats, and this is from Jaak Panksepp's work. He was the first guy who figured out that rats giggle. And you might think, well, what kind of stupid thing is that to study? It's like $50,000 research grant for giggling rats, you know. So, but he discovered the play circuitry in mammals. That's a big deal, right? It's like discovering a whole new continent. There's a play circuit in mammals. It's built right in, so it's not socially constructed. There's a biological platform for that. And so what Panksepp would do with rats, he found out if you take a rat pup away from its mother, it dies. Even if you feed it, even if you keep it warm, it dies. Now you can stop it from dying by taking a pencil with an eraser on the end and massaging it, right? Because rats won't live without love. And the same thing happens to human babies. And we saw that in Romania when there was that catastrophe after Ceausescu in the orphanages, where the orphanages were full of unwanted babies because Ceausescu insisted that every Romanian woman was constantly pregnant. So the orphanages stacked up with unwanted babies, and lots of them didn't even have names. And they were warehoused. Warmth, shelter, food. Devastating. Lots of them died. Most of them died before the first year. And the ones that didn't die were permanently dysfunctional because you have to be touched if you're a human being. It's not an option. You have to be played with. It's not an option. It's part of neurodevelopmental necessity. And you have to also play fair. So, because otherwise you produce a very disjointed child who isn't able to engage in the niceties of social interaction, which is continual play in some sense and reciprocity. So what Panksepp did with his rats, he noticed that male rats, juveniles, really like to wrestle. And they wrestle just like human beings wrestle. They pin each other, for crying out loud. It's like that rat has just lost. He's down for a 10 count, right? And so what you do is you take juvenile rats and you can find out that they want to play because you can attach a spring to them and then they'll try to run and you can measure how hard they're running by how hard they're pulling on the spring, and then you can estimate how motivated they are. And so you can find out that a nice, well-fed rat who doesn't have anything on his mind will still work hard to play to enter an arena where he's been allowed to play before. He'll work for that. So then you think, well, the rat's motivated. So the two rats go out there and they play, and so they're playing like dogs play, and everyone knows what that looks like. If you have any sense about dogs, they kind of go like this, and kids do that, and maybe you do that with your wife if you're going to play with her a little bit. my poor wife, man, when she had older siblings, and so she wasn't played with as much when she was little as she might have been. And I used to if you take a pillow, and you go like this 3 times, right? That means look out, a pillow is coming your way. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, whap! And she was completely dismayed at me. It's like, what do you do that for? And I thought, well, I eventually taught her that rule. The other thing I used to do... The other thing I used to do, is sometimes she'd come at me like this when we were playing around, and I'd grab her wrists and I'd knock her hands, her knuckles together, and she used to just get completely annoyed about that, and I thought, right? That's what you do. You just open your hands. Well, she didn't know that either, so she hadn't been played with enough when she was a little rat. And so, anyways, so you let the little rats go out there, right? And so let's imagine one of them is 10% bigger than the other. And so the 10% bigger rat wins, because 10% is enough in rat weight to ensure that you're going to be the pinner rather than the pinnee. Okay, so that's fine. So the big rat pins the little rat, and now the big rat is the authority rat. And so then the next time that the rats play, The little rat has to invite the big rat to play. So the big rat's out there being cool, and the little rat pops up and, does the whole will you play with me thing, and the big rat will deign to play with him. But if you pair them repeatedly, unless the big rat lets the little rat win 30% of the time, the little rat will not invite him to play. And Panksepp discovered that. It's like, I read that just blew me away. It's like, that is so amazing, because you see, well, first of there's an analogy to Piaget's ideas about the emergence of morality out of play in human beings, so that was very cool. But the notion that that was built into rats at the level of wrestling was, and they're social, they're deeply social animals, right? They have to know how to get along with one another. And most of their authority disputes, dominance disputes, you don't want them to end in bloodshed and combat. Because, if you're rat 1 and I'm rat 2 and we tear each other to shreds in a dominance dispute, rat 3 is just going to move in. It's really not a great strategy. And so it'd be better if we could settle our differences, somewhat peacefully. And so, so rats, anyways, Panksepp figured out that rats play. And not only that they play fair, and they seem to enjoy it. He also figured out, this was really cool too, that if you give juvenile rats attention deficit disorder drugs, Ritalin, suppresses play. So that's worth thinking about. It's like, well, why do you have to give juvenile human beings amphetamines in school? Well, because they need to play. Well, they don't get to play. They don't get to wrestle around. I mean, that's oppression as far as I can tell. They don't get to wrestle around. That's fine. Feed them some amphetamines, man. That'll shut down the old play circuits. Well, here's the other problem, is Panksepp found out that if you don't let juvenile male rats play, their prefrontal cortexes don't develop properly. Surprise, surprise, you're not letting them mature. It's like, what else would you expect? So, that's something to think about. Really hard, I would say. So there's some wolves going at it. Well, not exactly. There's some wolves having an authority dispute, let's, more technically speaking. And a lot of it's posturing, they tend not, well-socialized wolves tend not to hurt each other during authority disputes because, well, for obvious reasons. It's too dangerous. And so they have other ways of demonstrating who should be listened to, authorities. And there's chimps doing that. This particular, now, I think, if I remember correctly, I think it's right. This is a really cool picture because I think this chimps don't like snakes, by the way. So, for example, if you take a chimp that's never seen a snake and you show it a snake, it is not happy. It will get the hell away from that snake. If you bring a chimp anesthetized into a room full of chimps, the chimps will all get away from that and then look at the body. They don't like that either. And if you bring a big snake into a chimp cage, even if the chimps have never seen it, like they'll get away from it and then stare at it. And chimps out in the wild, if they see a big snake, they'll stand there and they have a noise that means something like, holy crap, that's a big snake, It actually means that technically, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But they stand away from it, and then they make this noise, which means, oh my God, look at the snake. And then they'll stand there for like 24 hours looking at the snake. And so the snakes are really, they're super stimuli for chimpanzees, so that's pretty interesting. And this chimp seemed to learn how to take this dead snake and go scare other chimps with it, and that was... That was partly how he established his authority, and well, there's a threat, and like if I was you and I was around that chimp, I would take that threat seriously because those things are no joke, man. And you see the same thing here with I don't remember what kind of monkey that is, but they're engaged in agonistic behavior, and and there has been, by the way, recent research showing that in higher order primates that there is snake detection circuitry that's built into them, right? So it's not learned. It's deeper than that. Now, for a long time, psychologists knew for a long time that I could make you afraid in a conditioning experiment much faster using a snake or a picture of a snake than a gun or a picture of a gun. So we can learn fear to snakes very rapidly, spiders as well. And so then people thought, well, maybe we were prepared to develop fear to snakes or spiders, that sort of thing. But the more recent research has indicated that it's more than just prepared, is that we have the detection circuitry built right into us. And, well, it's because, well, why wouldn't we? That's really the issue. It's like, it's not really that much of a surprise, unless you think of human beings as a blank slate. And if you think that, then I don't know, you should crawl out of the 16th century. That's how I would look at it. Because I mean, that's just gone, that idea. It's so wrong. So maybe you can think about this as a dominance hierarchy, but wolves look for credibility and competence as well. And chimpanzees don't like brutal tyrants, and so we'll talk about it as the hierarchy of authority. And so, well, this is kind of how it starts to develop. You know, you see, well, these girls are negotiating the domestic environment here, and how to behave properly, and how to share, and all that, and take turns. And so they're negotiating the hierarchy of authority. And if you're good at reciprocity, it's sometimes you're the authority, and sometimes the other person is the authority. That's fair play, right? And so these boys are doing the same thing, and you see, they're all smiling away. And so it looks like aggressive behavior, and people who are not very attentive, and who are paranoid, and who don't like human beings, confuse this with aggression, and they forbid it at schools, which is, you know, I know when my kids were going to school, for example, this was quite a while ago now, they were forbidden to pick up snow on the off chance they might throw a snowball. And we know how terrible that is. So what I told my son is that he was perfectly welcome to pelt any teacher he wanted to in the back of the head with a snowball, as long as he was willing to suffer the consequences of doing it. And I don't know if he ever did, but he was certainly happy with the idea, which made me very happy about him. So, yeah. So, you know, kids need to do this. They really, really, seriously need to do this. It's what civilizes them. And that needs to happen between the ages of 2 and 4, because if they're not civilized by the time they're 4, then you might as well just forget it. And that's a horrible statistic, but it's unbelievably well borne out in the relevant developmental literature. Like, there's lots of aggressive 2-year-olds, most of them are male. And if they stay aggressive past the age of 4, they tend to be lifetime aggressive. They make no friends, they're outcasts, they're much more likely to end up antisocial, criminal, delinquent, and in jail. And so, your kids need to be socialized between the ages of 2 and 4. And that's particularly true for the more aggressive males. And most of the aggressive 2-year-olds are male. And that isn't socialization, by the way.